A few weeks ago, I set out to make my fiance a ring for her birthday. I ended up making a ring for myself, but I still gave it to her. Anyway, that story's for a different video. The story for this video is about storing my ring that I gave to her for her birthday, because I'm not the type of man to wear someone else's birthday present. Some people call such a storage apparatus a ring box. I call it a ring tube on account of it being a tube and not a box. Do any of you remember that scene in the first Jurassic Park movie where Newman, yes, Newman, steals the dinosaur embryos in that space-age Barbasol can? Of course you do. That scene may have been the single most satisfying scene in all of cinematic history. Well, that Barbasol can started my love affair with Newman, and 32 years later I proposed to him using this tube. Wait, no, it was just a very loose design inspiration for this project. But don't accuse me of not being a romantic. The end result has very little in common with that Barbasol can, but I'm blaming that on the current supply shortage of Paleosaur DNA and not on my own design skills. I started my design with a little wooden base. A little wooden base with little brass feet, just like Newman did. The actual ring holding piece went through numerous design iterations, and if I'm being completely honest, I didn't even have a plan for holding the ring before I finished everything else. My first thought was to have the tube box double as a display tree for the various engagement rings I continue to make for my fiance. The display tree idea would have had the rings held with spring wire, bent to hold the rings from the inside in tension, all up along the sides of a pole reaching unto the heavens. However lopsided my ratio of engagement rings to fiancés is, I'm inclined to believe that my singular fiancé would rather have multiple engagement rings than share a single ring with multiple people. That being said, I think there's a limit on the amount of rings she's willing to be showered with, and I'm not sure my lathe is capable of turning a length of rod long enough to reach the heavens anyway. In the end, I settled for something more traditional, some foam with a crack to press the ring into. A far cry from the heavens, but by this point the project already had a buttocks, and my mind had become addicted to the crack. My upholstery skills are wholly lacking though, so I needed a way to hide the foam that didn't require upholstery. What I came up with combined the ring display stand idea of the ring tree and a more traditional singular ring box, so up to 4 rings can be displayed in a brass-covered foam block. On top, I glued a small scrap of painter's cloth to give it a look that didn't scream, "This is a piece of foam you salvaged from your GPU packing material, isn't it, you cheap bastard?" Just like in Jurassic Park. I don't love the result, but I don't hate it either, and that's good enough for this channel. And I guess by extension good enough for my relationship? Let's not get too buried in transitive properties here. We've got more practical matters to attend to. To hold the cover tube over the ring holding tube, we need some sort of clamping knob. Tube. And, because the case serves to display rings as well as store them, it's imperative that the knob have a tiny naked man on top. For this, I leveraged the internet. Being able to reproduce an almost exact replica of ancient pieces of art in a few hours with a couple of clicks of a button will never cease to amaze me. Humans really are impressive. I settled on the famous sculpture of Atlas supporting the skies, appropriately naked and appropriately metaphoric. I would like to share with you all something very special to me in this video that was supposed to be about making an engagement ring for my fiance. It's a laboratory scale, something I've wanted for most of my adult life but couldn't ever justify the cost, even of a used model. I found it in a local thrift store, buried under a pile of industrial junk. It didn't work. The scale mechanism was jammed, and when I plugged it in, fiddling with some knobs failed to produce a result. I wouldn't even have pegged it as a scale in the condition it was in if it weren't for this very classy factory-installed sticker on the side proclaiming such. I had walked past it multiple times that day, and had even walked past it and straight out the door on multiple visits prior. What caught my eye that day in particular was the 50% price drop from $16 to $8. Little did I know that the $8 I spent that day would be the best $8 I've ever spent, and I know a thing or two about spending $8. Without further ado, I welcome you to Jurassic Park. No, that's not right. Welcome to No, we just went through this. Welcome to... I don't know. Just appreciate this scale I got for $8 at Jurassic Park. Damn it. Anyway, let's not let our collective lust for precise engineering distract us. You may be wondering why I welcomed you here, to Jurassic. It's because we need to do some low-budget chemistry. With the power of the sun, and a piece of old water heater plumbing I got from my cousin, we're going to turn this disgusting little green man into a beautiful copper titan, capable of suspending the stars themselves. To do so, we need some conductive paint. And me being me, that means we need to mix up some conductive paint. This formula is loosely based on various references I've found around the internet and tweaked to a point that I deem acceptable. It's a mixture of resin, graphite powder, and acetone. The acetone keeps the resin from chemically reacting through the power of science, and also acts as a thinner so I can use an airbrush to apply it. Once the acetone evaporates, the resin cures and the graphite is more or less glued to whatever you just painted. The ratio of graphite to resin is crucial. Resin isn't conductive, so too much of it and the paint isn't conductive, but too little resin and the graphite simply wipes off. The graphite needs to form a continuous layer of graphite on graphite action for the painted surface to be completely electrically conductive. I typically apply the paint in a few thick coats, mostly because I'm impatient and don't like waiting for the resin to cure between coats. I've found that 2 to 3 coats is sufficient. More is better, but there are diminishing returns, and getting good coverage is more important than a thick coat anyway. Between each coat, it's very important to buff the paint to the sheen of a freshly sharpened pencil lead. Most of the graphite doesn't end up sticking to the surface, probably because I spray it on too thick, but the polishing ensures the graphite that does stick is good and stuck. With the statue painted, it's time for the 80s montage magic. My electroplating solution is filthy, my conductive paint is half-baked, my patience is very thin. So the result is far, very far from perfect, but I actually like the little knobby, grainy look that this setup provides. It almost looks like I cast the little guy, if I had cast him in the sand at the local beach, that is. With a design this intricate, with lots of little peaks and valleys, getting an even coat of copper is not feasible with my current solution. I'd go into why that's the case, but I'd have to get a PhD in chemistry before I understand it well enough myself, so just trust me on this one. Still, I think the bare portions, without any copper on them, give the statue a bit of charm. Charm. Yeah, that's what I'm going with. It's not shoddy, it's charming. I hope it's become clear why we needed a tiny naked man for this project. But now we need a way to display his nudity, both when the ring box is in display mode and when it's in storage mode. For that, a simple threaded upright will do the trick. In storage mode, the knob clamps the outer tube to the wooden base, and in display mode, the same threads serve to display the finial as pure naked decoration, just as Zeus intended. For the true punishment of Atlas wasn't spending eternity laboring under the weight of the sky, but rather the humiliation of an eternity with your tiny penis immortalized in artwork for all to see. Zeus truly was sadistic. The last part we need is the cover. There's nothing fancy here, it's just a tube with an end cap soldered on one end, and I feel like we've all seen enough tubes in this video about a ring box, so I'll breeze right through this. With the last component finished, it's time to assemble our Barbasol can. Is it as satisfying as Newman's space-age shaving cream? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. Not in this video, of course, because the only ring I have to show this ring box off with is the aforementioned birthday gift to myself that I made for my fiance, and I don't want to spoil that video prematurely. Someday I may know whether my work ranks amongst the Newmans of the sky, for the court of public opinion is supreme, with the guiding light of Jurassic Park illuminating our path. Regardless the outcome of my public trial, I like to think Newman, may Zeus rest his soul, would be proud. For today, we push not only the bounds of human progress, but perhaps even the bounds of our own corporeal forms. We have become more than mere mortals, for Zeus may have enslaved Atlas, but we polished his shiny metal ass. Who, then, is the true master of Olympus, I say,